Deleks we're sitting in Leh and I wanted to talk to you about some tourism issues. Can you introduce yourself first?
Yes, July. My name is Deleks Namgyal, and I'm the president of All Ladakh Tour Operators Association based in Leh.
How long have you been the president?
It's going to be 3 years, sir.
And what is the association exactly?
So, All Ladakh Tour Operators Association has membership base of about 300 plus tour operators based out of Leh, and our primary objective in this association, is to promote and market Ladakh as a tourism destination, and also to, work on environment and sustainable tourism practices.
So, tourism is going to be 50 years old next year in Ladakh. I think it was opened in 1974.
74.
How have you seen the development of tourism in these 50 years?
I would like to break up the development aspect into two parts. When Ladakh was open for tourism in 1974, for about 30-40 years till about early 2000s, and maybe till about 2005 or the initial 2009 period was we were primarily our target audience and the tourists were coming from Europe and other regions of the world, with very few domestic tourists. Post 2009-10, we saw a large influx of domestic tourists coming to Ladakh. So the scenarios in both the cases are quite different. In the initial 30-40 years, I think the model of tourism that we followed, or the kind of tourists that were coming to Ladakh, were primarily coming for the culture, for learning, for adventure, and wildlife. And the model was quite sustainable in the sense like there were not many hotels that time. People loved living in village homestays with the families, learning, experiencing the day-to-day life. But post 2009-10, when the domestic influx happened, the Ladakh tourism industry completely transitioned from being an eco-friendly, sustainable tourism destination to one which became very commercial and urbanized.
And this 2009-10, was it also to do with Three Idiots, the film, or there were some other factors?
Yes, I think primarily Three Idiots was the main reason that Ladakh got hugely popular with the Indian domestic tourists. And post that, we've seen the domestic tourist numbers growing quite rapidly. And this rapid transformation and the rapid growth in the tourism numbers led to a lot of construction happening in Leh and in other places like Nubra and Pangong owing to that.
So, was most of the tourism focused, domestic especially, focused on places like Nubra and Pangong?
Yes, I would say, because these two regions were well connected in terms of road connectivity. The connectivity was good, and again, those regions progressed much faster than the other destinations. So this circuit became very popular: Leh, Nubra, Pangong.
And so, what are the major sort of challenges that have come because of this?
I would say, in a way, the growth of domestic tourism actually in the scenario of Ladakh, if we were to consider, I think it happened at the right time because as we all know that Europe went into a recession around the same time, and Ladakh was primarily dependent on European tourists till then. And since Europe went into a economic recession, the inflow from the European markets reduced, and at the same time, the domestic market started rising quite a lot. And I think we would attribute that to mainly Three Idiots and some efforts of a lot of tour operators from Ladakh who go to these domestic markets for promotion and marketing.
But in terms of, because I think the numbers, if I read correctly, went from about 500 in 1974 to now about 500,000 or something like that.
Yes.
So, in terms of even just sheer numbers and the ability to cope with the impacts, such as more vehicular transport, waste, garbage, etc. What are the sorts of main issues that have come up?
So yes, you're right. In terms of these growing numbers, what we also realized was that Ladakh, for that matter, or for any Himalayan destination, the prime reason when a local domestic Indian tourist wants to come to these places is only during the summers. And that is maybe one drawback that these Himalayan destinations have, is they primarily remain a summer destination, market. And we've seen these growing numbers, at some point of time when in 2019, when there were like about 3 lakh 28,000 tourists coming to Ladakh. We somehow felt that that was when the time, we started talking about mass tourism, over tourism, and sustainability, carrying capacity, how we can improve Ladakh as a destination that promotes quality tourism and all. At the same time, we also did a study of the growing numbers, and we realized that Ladakh being primarily a summer tourist destination, all the growth in terms of numbers of tourist arrivals coming to Leh was happening, was sadly happening in the summer months of May, June, and July. So now from 3 lakh 28,000, when we reached about 5 lakh 30,000, we realized 80-90% of the growth had happened in these 3 months only. So that was putting a lot of stress on the region. It was in terms of environments, water scarcity, pollution, waste management. These issues started coming up, then. Earlier, we had no issues with these such large numbers. There were no waste management issues, and there were no water issues also back then. But now, obviously, uh, you know, the hotels are being more modern in terms of comfort. You have hot water, running cold water available. So yes, I think we're consuming a lot of natural resources, but at the
Toilets have
same
also
time,
changed. No?
yes,
Toilets have also changed.
toilets have changed. So yeah, so it invariably is putting a stress. But what we feel is that if Ladakh can be promoted and marketed as a you know extended tourist season, like we've started promoting our autumns, our summers, and the winters. So if we have we can cater to more large number of tourists coming to Ladakh, provided all the growth does not happen in the peak summer months, and people come in the autumn, spring, and the winter months also.
Okay, so one is distributing it through the year, but also what about distributing it through Ladakh so that it's not concentrated in a few places?
Right. So one is we're looking at the seasons, and the other is we're looking at opening more tourist destinations. But again, the prime fear of there has been a lot of talk and initiative by the governments and the Autonomous Hill Development Council of Leh of trying to put the rural villages on the tourism map. Now that's a good initiative, but at the same time, what we had also proposed to the government agencies and the Hill Council was that we can start taking tourists to these villages, but at the same time, before doing that, I think we should have a some rules or regulations or guidelines, in terms of uh, broadly, if we were to classify it into one simple term, I would call it the rural tourism policy. So apart from your Ladakh tourism policy or your responsible sustainable tourism policy, if we can have some rules and guidelines for the rural belts of how we shape tourism in these rural belts, I think that would be more beneficial.
And what are the sorts of main, say, safeguards or things that should be in such a policy?
So primarily, what we're trying to, convince the government about sending people, tourists, to these rural belts is we're trying to, we're proposing that the rural belts should remain as it is without much, development or uh, major interventions which is required. So primarily what we've proposed to them is that one is in these rural belts, if we were to send tourists, I mean there should be no major hotels. Homestays should be given the most, priority, and people should be encouraged to conserve their old homes and convert it into a homestay to let to welcome tourists. And I think the rural belts of Ladakh, the virgin villages or far-flung villages, I think that is the only model that seems sustainable. At the same time, bringing economic benefits and employment benefits to the rural people.
Can this in some way also be connected to other livelihoods? Because you know that in many places over dependence on tourism is fragile. No? If suddenly for some reason Ladakh is cut off, like happened in COVID period, and because it's also border area, anything can happen. What about making sure that other livelihoods are also in some way being enhanced?
Right. So primarily, I think the one is like tourism. If you consider tourism, it's not a standalone product, for sure. Tourism involves, if you're talking about the rural belts or these villages, we look at agriculture, we can look at handicrafts, we can look at art and crafts or metal work. Say in liquor, there are potters. So if we link all these, agriculture, agrotourism, and say tourism, your homestays, your art and crafts and handicrafts, and I think all that will make more sense, and it will also the region can not be just dependent on incoming tourists, but at the same time you can sell your handicrafts or art and crafts as souvenirs to the tourists. So I think that is a much sustainable model of tourism.
We saw that, for instance, in Uttarakhand and elsewhere, that during COVID, because no tourists were going to these areas, they had to fall back on their agriculture or other old traditional livelihoods. And so they realized that unless they sustain that, independent also of tourism, it is a bit, what should I say, the sustainability becomes a little bit of a question.
Right.
So do you think something like that here? So not connected only to tourism, but also...
So yes, during COVID, the same happened in Ladakh also. A lot of people who were working in other parts of India and studying, students and people who were working, all professionals came back to their, to Ladakh, and invariably they went back to their villages, and they started living in their village homes after, a long period, and that is when they started working on the fields. And we felt that okay, COVID is a game changer for sure. But times how they change, and when COVID got over, a lot of priorities went back to what they were doing. So they went back to the cities and pursued that. But yes, there are some entrepreneurs who stuck and are working on these in the villages, farming, and so I think that's become a good model. And sadly, Leh being a very popular tourist destination, every entrepreneur or a young person who wants to do something of their own wants and tourism being largely little easy to enter into market, so a lot of people are getting into tourism. And over the last few years we've seen a lot of educated people getting into mushroom farming, getting into fashion design, getting into photography, getting into video making, music. So we've seen a lot of people diversify into other fields apart from tourism.
That sounds positive. Tell me one thing, in many places that I've been to, homestay owners or even others, they complain more about the domestic tourists than the foreign tourists, and which sounds, I feel ashamed to hear that. What is your experience, and how do we change that if that's the case?
I think one is, for sure that the foreign tourists are much more mature. They've been traveling for a longer period than what domestic Indian tourists are. and the maturity levels are quite different. So Indian tourists, for that matter, largely are not mature travelers, and foreign tourists. Ladakh, when tourism opened, it was only, Ladakhis had the first interaction with maybe the Europeans or the Japanese and other people coming, explorers and travelers. So that is how the interaction grew, and we, the travelers or the tourists, they learned a lot from us, and we also, it was both ways. We learned a lot from the European tourists, and so, and when the domestic tourist influx started happening, again, so they came in large numbers. Their priorities, vis-a-vis, the foreign tourists, are quite different. So foreign tourists, for that matter, if they visit a monastery, they would want to learn and experience, and try and gain as much knowledge as possible about the monastery, about Buddhism, about the village experiences. Whereas what we have observed is that majority of the domestic tourists, barring a few, percentage of mature travelers who have seen the world, who want to learn, barring these, majority of the tourists, I would primarily call them, selfie tourists in today's social media, you know, age of social media. So we see a lot of Indian tourists who are making reels and stories, and their main purpose is to come and, because of the landscape and nice landscape, they want to take as much pictures and videos and content, but their learnings would be zero from this place. So they go to a monastery just to click pictures. They go to Khardungla Pass just to take pictures and be on the highest road. Whereas they don't involve. The other important factor is a lot of these foreign tourists would involve a local guide to know more about the region and learn from the guide. Whereas domestic Indian tourists do not need any guides, because their purpose for this travel is quite different.
So how do we change that?
How do we change that? I think travel with times, has to become more immersive, experiential, and it's up to the tour operators and the people who are associated with the tourism industry to innovate, bring out much immersive products and experiential learning programs that probably we can pitch to the domestic clients and ensure that they learn something from Ladakh.
Maybe we need another new version of Three Idiots, which actually shows more responsible way of traveling. So,
Right, yeah.
okay, one. So tell me about some of ALTOA's or your own company's efforts at trying to change this, like bring in more environmental responsibility or otherwise change things.
So, as from ALTOA's aspect, we've been trying to reinvent, reimagine, rethink. During COVID, we did a lot of work, because since COVID, there were no tourists. We did a lot of introspection. We did a lot of brain, discussions and sessions amongst some experts and from the seniors in our trade, and we came to the conclusion that if we were to change the tourism industry of Ladakh, the local entrepreneurs or the local people who are associated with the industry must come together, collaborate, and make the change. And in the last 1 or 2 years, we have really contemplated on changing how things were going. For example, we've now taken charge of changing how adventure or trekking industry in Ladakh works, and we're trying to now, you know, put in place standard operating procedures with rules, regulations, guidelines to be imposed to all ALTOA members who are into this trade. For example, I'll give you a small example of, most of our learnings from this came from the closure of Stoke Peak. And after that, we realized that what the way we had been
Yeah,
conducting.
just quickly tell us about that closure. What is?
So the closure happened in 2019. Stoke Kangri was one of the most popular trekking peaks in Ladakh. Because of its accessibility from Leh, it was closed. Stoke village is 15-18 kilometers. From there, you have a 6,000 meter plus trekking peak, which was not technical at the same time. And there was a lot of interest in, the global community and the Indian market about the peak. And we had been receiving a lot of tourists for the Stoke Kangri peak. Now, due to this unregulated growth of people going to to the base camp of Stoke Kangri, and it was a 2, 3, 4 day trek. There were 3 or 4 accesses from where you could come, but at the same time, the growth was unregulated. There were, last few years we saw a lot of influx of people going to these treks, and sadly, at that time, none of the people who were associated with the industry or the government or the administration or the local hill council or the councillor or the goba or the village community associations like us, and broadly adventure tour operators association based on pan India level, and guides, cooks, helpers, tour operators, the pony men. I think everyone failed in doing the duty. Our duty primarily was one, to make money out of the trek by sending groups. Okay, everyone was doing that, at the best. But our prime duty towards the environment, everyone neglected. So there was litter, there was pollution on the base camps, which led to the water pollution, water getting polluted, and Stoke Kangri, Stoke village, were dependent on the Stoke glacier for their drinking purposes, for irrigation. So once the source started getting polluted, the glacier started receding. The Stoke village community took a collective decision to ban uh, trekking on Stoke Kangri. So
When was that?
this was in 2019,
Okay.
and initially they said they'll close it for 2 or 3 years, but we are trying to now talk to the village community to reopen. Now we've framed very strict SOPs, guidelines, rules, which we are proposing to them. But I think they're happy without any tourist coming to Stoke Kangri. So it was a big learning for us, where every community who failed in doing the duty, and in a way it was a good learning for us, and now we are trying to implement why we failed, the actions that we should have taken. Now we're trying to put it into on paper, and we're trying to impose those strict rules and regulations in treks all over Ladakh.
So you were giving an example of the rules.
So recently, yes, there's a place called Ko Valley. It's Sko Valley in Phobrang, Changtang, Eastern Ladakh. So last year, with we ALTOA has always been taking initiatives in opening new routes, trekking routes, because we all know with development, a lot of our trek routes have been technically killed, because of the road connectivity now. So we're trying to open some new routes. And last year we went for a recce of Ko Valley trek in Phobrang. It's a beautiful 6 to 7 day trek. It's a high altitude trek, and in that trek, during those 6 to 7 days, you can visit, on the way, or there are some in the interior parts. There are 6 to 7 lakes, high altitude lakes, which are pristine, beautiful. Obviously, not as big as your Pangong Tso and Somariri, but smaller lakes, but very, pristine. And this route primarily used to be the village communities, nomadic route, where they take their, livestock for grazing in the summers and winters. So we did that recce. We put that, proposal to the government, and we are thankful to the Ministry of Home Affairs for, opening that area for foreign tourists. So now we've made certain rules, regulations, SOPs for the trek, where we're trying to impose a lot of new things which have not been done till now in Ladakh, based on our learnings from Stoke Kangri. So we're trying to impose a lot of rules and regulations where this would be the first trek in Ladakh where plastic will be completely banned. So we'll be giving opportunities to the village women community to stitch these cloth woven bags, where where all the trekking rations will go into these bags minus the plastic. So we are eradicating plastic right at the source and not taking it into these pristine trek route. Yeah. And apart from that, so this would empower the village community, give them additional income in terms of so throughout the winters they'll be able to stitch these bags for us, and next year we will and we're also regulating the number of people who go on this trek, because this trek is a very short window of maybe 50 to 70 days where it operates, because that region receives immense heavy snowfall. So it is cut off technically for 10 months. So we have a very short window of 2 months, and we know that the camping sites have limited space in terms of how many trekkers come and pitch up tents. So based on that, we are coming out with a number, and also we should not be able to put stress, and we are trying to assess the kind of resources and infrastructure we have. For example, in Pobrang, Yurgo or Lukung villages, we're trying to promote their homestays. We're trying to make it mandatory for tourists, for trekkers, to stay at least minimum 1 night or 2 nights in the village, so that the village community benefits from the trek. We are trying to train guides and cooks and helpers from the villages, so that the maximum benefits can be given to the village community. At the same time, based on the number of accommodation available in Pobrang, based on the number of horses that the village community has for these treks, and based on the number of the area of the camping site, how many tents can be pitched up, we will come to a number of per day regulation, as where we decide along with the village community, taking them into confidence that every day we can send not more than 30 or 40 people for the trek. So that way we can regulate. So 40 people go on a trek, day one they camp there, next day 30 people go, they go to the camp 2, they come to camp 1. So we're not trying to create sending unregulated people, which would invariably destroy the ecology and the ecosystem of the place.
So this is some way of actually trying to build a carrying capacity kind of model.
In a way, yes.
Which
Not
is
a
otherwise
lot-
very complicated.
Otherwise
if
it's
you can-
complicated,
yeah.
but from a layman's perspective,
Yeah.
Carrying capacity for me is a 10 by 10 square meter area. How many people can comfortably stand there,
Yeah.
sit there, sleep there? So
Some thumb rules, yeah. That's very interesting. So, but this is something that you can probably make sure that your own members are following these sorts of SOPs and rules. What about outside tour agencies? How do you
So-
control those?
Yes. So in Leh, what we're trying to, our business model has been simple. From the initial years, there may be some leakages into our system, but our system primarily, we say that any outside company, be it national, international, people coming from abroad, from other states of India, we say that you have to work with a local tour operator. So any company who's coming to Ladakh to do this trek will have to engage a local tour operator, and the local tour operator, hand in glove, they can work together. And since as an association we can impose our rules only to our members and not to anyone else, because so we will impose these rules to our members, who in turn works with an international agency or a national agency. They will ensure that all our SOPs and rules and regulations are followed.
And there is also, like with when 2019, when it became Union Territory, I know that based in Pune, I know that the Maharashtra Tourism Development Agency wanted to set up a big hotel, and I'm sure there's a lot of interest in setting up big infrastructure here by national and foreign hoteliers and so on. How does that get controlled?
So yes, from the tourism point of view, our presidents, prior presidents, people who were in the association, other associations related to tourism, had all taken a very, strict stand on this, that we must protect Ladakh tourism industry, or maybe Ladakh in general, uh, for the local community, and whatever benefits that we get from tourism should first go to the natives of Ladakh. In a way, it was to protect the business interest, economic interest, employment opportunities for the people of natives of Ladakh, and also to safeguard the environment and the culture. You know, and if you would realize, with the population, the kind of population that Ladakh has, we just 3 lakhs, 2 districts, Leh, Kargil. So, with very thin population, with such a vast land area, it was imperative for us to safeguard our region, our culture, our environment. So that was the prime concern, yes.
So that has still worked, as in big hoteliers and all have not been able to
I mean,
come in.
the stand is till today we are on it, and we've not let any of the big hotels or chains or big companies to come and set up hotels or properties in Ladakh.
And in this, I think another major challenge would also be about who controls the land, right? So after 2019, and without the kind of constitutional safeguards that were promised, do you think that's a threat? Is it like a major issue that you need those safeguards on land and resources and so on?
I think yes, constitutional safeguard is would do wonders for Ladakh, and I think the entire Ladakhi community, you know, everyone is in favor of a safeguard, be our top politicians, be experts, be it any strata of the society. So yes, safeguard is important, and from that safeguard we can ensure that Ladakh remains what it used to be, and the thin population is really a worrisome thing for us, and that way the land, I think the Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council still has the ownership of state land in Ladakh, and that way we are sure that the Autonomous Hill Development Councils are safeguarding land as a priority for Ladakh, and it's only some private people on the private lands are trying to do something against what our stand is of Ladakh, and but those are again very less numbers, and I think we should be able to manage and control them.
So I think a very big challenge here is internal Ladakhi society itself. How does it remain or become united and sort of understand that the long-term challenges of unregulated tourism or unregulated development per se would end up destroying Ladakh itself. So, is there a lot more sort of discussion on those lines?
Yeah, post UT, I mean, the only worry that personally I would like to speak in my capacity and not others, and what I felt was that when the central government announced a lot of funds for development of Ladakh, it was really worry. It was a big worry, because I thought if the central government is keen on giving financial funds for the development of Ladakh, I think they had sanctioned about 6,000 crores per annum, and for the next 5 years is almost 30,000 crores.
Yeah.
That's a big amount, and I think if the administration or would have, but sadly that 30,000 crore, what we realized was going into the development of infrastructure.
Yeah.
What they were doing with those funds was building roads. Okay, roads are basic. Every village needs to be connected, which is important. In terms of connectivity, road connectivity, your internet, phone connectivity, that all development is required. But what we realized was, apart from that, all the major chunk of the funds were going into developing infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is buildings, and all those buildings were created with cement, concrete,
Yeah.
being imported from other states of India,
Yeah.
and creating a lot of pollution. At the same time, the administration was, talking about carbon neutrality and stuff. And we said that unless you start creating with local resources, local materials, you know, if you look at the Leh Palace and other old buildings of Ladakh, they've been standing there for centuries, and there was no need to I mean, it's a 7, 8 story, 10-story building, without any pillar and concrete and stuff. So it's really with the amount of technology now, learnings that we have, we are not trying to. So it was really worrying for us, and we were happy that the due to our limited season, working season, we were not able to spend majority of the funds. So otherwise Leh would have completely changed. And at the same time, then the governments are talking about sustainable tourism. They feel that tourism has been the biggest disruptor in terms of the scarcity of water, environment, pollution, I don't know. So all the blame game actually goes on to tourism. And we had been telling them that rather than talking about sustainable tourism, the government or the agency should be talking about sustainable development. So you are trying to develop Ladakh, let's develop Ladakh sustainably. At least use 30%, 20% of the local resources, materials, your earth, your wood, and your if you use local materials to build infrastructure, I think that is more in tune with nature, and without doing much harm. So yes, all those were a big worry for us. And I think now with so sustainability is the only way that we can move forward. So not only tourism, every you should have a sustainable vision, and development needs to be sustainable from the government and the administration point of view. And likewise, the tourism industry is trying to introspect and also doing major changes within themselves. For example, all hoteliers, irrespective of have taken a mutual decision to ban mineral water, plastic mineral water bottles.
Okay.
So, and there are hoteliers. It's not mandated by the government. It's not mandated by any department, but it's a self imposed decision, and people are doing it. A lot of hoteliers are doing it. A lot of it are in the process of doing it. So I think these kind of small interventions, can really help. Yes.
Well, thanks. All the best for this, because Ladakh is such a incredibly unique place. It would be a shame that people who come to see this unique place themselves end up causing these problems. And of course, the issue of governance is very, very important. So people coming from New Delhi need to understand the uniqueness of Ladakh. So all the best for your efforts to make sure that this happens.
Thank you so much, and it was a pleasure, talking to you. And lastly, I would just like to add up to that development, sustainable development point. We had raised this issue with the departments and the government agencies that if you are giving us 100 rupees for the development of Ladakh, we requested them that I mean, the funds are being given only for development. There are no funds for conservation. So we said, out of 100, if you use 80 for development, let's keep 20 for conservation. Conservation of your natural ecosystem, natural resources, your natural heritage, living heritage.
Yeah.
And we see in terms of development, a lot of fund goes to conservation of heritage buildings. Okay, that is also important. That's part of our history. We need to conserve the natural, physical assets that we have. But at the same time, we're not doing anything for the environment, for conservation of water sources. So we had requested for 20% out of 100 for the conservation of natural resources.
And what was the response?
I mean, hopefully, I think a lot of NGOs, a lot of environmentalists will need to put pressure to the governments to allocate funds for, conservation. Only then it can be given them.
Also, I think from what I've seen, this may be the only place in India, or one of the few places, where the tour operators, or with the tourism agencies, let's say, and the operators, and the civil society organizations working on environment and culture and all, are sort of coming together for a common platform. Is that right?
It is. what we realized was like Ladakh has a lot of civil societies, there are a lot of associations, there are a lot of NGOs working on the environment, education, health, other aspects. The whole idea was that people should come together and collaborate. Unless we collaborate, one association working in this direction, all our aims and objectives seem to be the same.
Mm.
We all are concerned about you know the future of Ladakh, the future of our people and all that. So I think with that common objective, aim and objective, it's better that rather than working individually at their own levels, if we can collaborate, we can become a stronger voice and we can put our points on the table much better.
So I think both in this respect and in trying to develop more environmentally sustainable, culturally sustainable tourism, Ladakh could be a model for the rest of the Himalaya at least.
Yeah, we're trying to create and work together, and hopefully in the trekking adventure industry, I would like to show you the results in the coming 1 or 2 years, that where we would put a lot of SOPs, regulations in place, and there be no issue of waste and litter, and hopefully we would eradicate plastic and a lot of waste issues from the mountain valleys. Yes.
So let's do another interview in a couple of years to see how that's worked.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All
Deleks.
right, sir. Thank you so much.
Jai.
Jai.